Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Eileen O'Reilly, the 116th president of the National Press Club and the managing editor of Standards and Training at Axios. Thank you all for joining us both here in person and online for a headliner event with Maryland Governor Wes Moore. We are happy to accept your questions, and after Governor Moore's opening remarks, I'll ask as many as time permits. To submit a question online, please email headliners@press.org and put Governor Moore in the subject line. For our C-SPAN and public radio audiences, please be aware that in the audience today are members of the general public, so any applause or reaction you hear is not necessarily from the working press. It is now my pleasure to introduce our distinguished head table. Please stand when your name is called. Starting on my far right, Larry Miller, anchor of WUSA TV. Jeffrey Ballou, producer of ABC News and past president of the National Press Club. Anna Johnson, the Washington Bureau Chief of the Associated Press. Tyler Wyant, Deputy Congress Editor of Politico. April Ryan, White House Correspondent for the Griot. I will get to the next person in a moment. Lori Russo, President of Stanton Communications and co-leader of the Headliners team. And to my left, Donna Lywin-Leger, founder of DC Media Strategies and past president of the National Press Club and co-lead of the Headliners team. Chuck Porcari, principal of Seneca Park and organizer of today's luncheon. Thank you, Chuck. Rick Hutzel, columnist of the Baltimore Banner and a board member at both the Fallen Journalists Memorial Foundation and the National Press Club Journalism Institute. David Turner, Director of Communications for the Governor's Office. Mike Smith, environmental reporter of Coastal Point newspaper and National Press Club board member. And Eden Harris, national politics digital producer for Spectrum News and board member of the Washington Association of Black Journalists. All right, thank you. So, on January 18th, Wes Moore became Maryland's first Black governor in the state's 246-year history, and just the third African-American elected governor in United States history. In the 6 months since taking office, Governor Moore has signed into law legislation creating a first-in-the-nation state-paid service year option for recent high school graduates, with opportunities for work in fields such as healthcare, education, and environment. He has also signed into law a bill that mandates that 100% of Maryland's energy be produced by renewable sources by 2035, accomplished in part by the incentivization of private capital investment and offshore wind generation. Moore says public safety is his #1 priority as governor. Part of that was the launch of a new all-of-the-above approach to public safety, which combines strong investments in law enforcement with improved coordination across all aspects of government, and state funding for education, workforce training, and behavioral health support. With this program, he hopes there will be new opportunities for young people that help break the cycle of arrest and imprisonment. In recent days, Governor Moore has also announced the revival of a multi-billion-dollar mass transit plan for the Baltimore region, and the formation of the Maryland Economic Council to identify opportunities for job creation. That said, it has not been entirely smooth sailing in Annapolis for the governor. The National Rifle Association is suing him over new Maryland gun laws. And last week, he got into a war of words with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis after the Republican governor, during a campaign stop in New Hampshire, cited the city of Baltimore as an example of what is wrong in America. So yes, it's been a slightly busy start for the 63rd governor of Maryland, but being busy seems to be a second nature for the governor. In the 45 years since his birth in Tacoma Park, Maryland, he has earned a master's degree in international relations as a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University. He deployed to Afghanistan as a captain with the 82nd Airborne after the 9/11 attacks. He served as a White House Fellow on issues of national security and international relations. He built a Baltimore-based business to help underserved students navigate college. And he served as CEO of the Robin Hood Foundation. In his spare time, he wrote several best-selling books, including a book that addresses the fragile nature of opportunity in America through the story of the other Wes Moore, a kid with the same name from the same city who was serving a life sentence in prison. We are very eager to hear from Governor Moore about his thoughts and ideas as we move forward into a presidential election year in America, and his read on the consequential issues before us. Please join me in giving a warm National Press Club welcome to Maryland Governor Wes Moore.
Thank you. Good afternoon. President O'Reilly, thank you so much. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. And yes, it has been an eventful first 6 months over in Annapolis. But as I've learned, they say, don't judge me by my friends, judge me by my enemies. And we're seeing that in the first 6 months here in Annapolis. So I'm thankful for the chance to lead a state that I love so deeply. I'm thankful for your leadership. I'm thankful for this invitation. I'm thankful for all of you and for this head table. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that today, for April Ryan, this is her daughter's 21st birthday today. And so I want to wish Ryan a happy and blessed birthday. And it says so much that her mom is here today on this day. Thank you. It's a joy to be with so many people who truthfully and frankly are friends, people who we have been on this journey together for a very long time. I'm grateful to be here with our interns and the work that our interns are doing here. And I'm thankful also to be here in a room that I also consider to be part of my extended family, because many people might not know that my father died when I was young. He actually died in front of me when I was 3 years old. But my father was a journalist. My father was actually a member of the Washington Association of Black Journalists. And so it is wonderful to see you, and thank you for your leadership. And everyone who spent time with my father would say that there are a couple passions that he had in life. One was his family, and the other was his work. That he loved being a journalist. He loved telling the stories. He loved asking the questions. And he loved making sure that the truth was understood. That was his passion. And I'm grateful to be in a room with so many people who don't just share that same passion that my father has, but people who are spending time in understanding that the future of our democracy depends on it. The future of everything that we are depends on an ability to have a free and independent press, to be able to ask the questions, to be able to search for truth, and to be able to make sure that that truth is something that the people of our society can actually lean on. And so I'm grateful for this chance to be here, even though, honestly, a little bit intimidated. I led soldiers in Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne Division, but I got to tell you, I've never given a room in front of a speech of journalists. So I never realized my greatest challenge was still yet to come. But I'm honored to be here because our country needs the free press. Our country needs you. Because in order for our country to prosper, it means that we've got to be a nation of truth and not a nation of myths. And we need people who are going to protect that truth. And when I think about the work that you all do every day, you debunk those myths every single day. Myths about our economy, myths about our elections, myths about our education system. But when I was thinking about what I wanted to speak a little bit about today in my prepared remarks, I thought about one myth that I think oftentimes is misunderstood and a myth that continues to persist in our communities and it goes unnoticed. And that's the myth about how we understand and how we talk about this issue of public safety. We know that since the 1990s, incidences of violent crime have gone down across America. That since the 1990s, we've had fewer murders, fewer rapes, fewer assaults. But today, the fear of violence seems more widespread than ever before. And that constant fear has given birth to, and it is fueled by, a collection of false narratives that we allow to continue to exist. The false narratives of some politicians who say that every urban area is a city in crisis. A false narrative of some in the media who say that violence is everywhere, at all times, and never ending, and unabating. And the false narrative of some in the public who have come to believe that violence is just simply an inescapable part of American life. Now, as chief executive of Maryland, as a combat veteran myself, as a father, and as a citizen, there is nothing that is more important to me than the safety and security of the people in our neighborhoods and in our communities. And I also believe that we cannot truly address the reality of violence unless we simultaneously deal with the false narratives of violence, and that's what I want to talk about today. This first myth that we need to confront is the false narrative of the politician. Since there doesn't ever seem to be an off year in election cycles, as I'm learning, we are now entering another silly season of politics and another silly season of competitive races. And candidates are continuing to lean on violence to scare people to support them. And the truth is, these candidates don't have a plan. What they have is a playbook. Where 3 weeks ago, yes, someone who's currently running for office could not keep our city's name out of their mouth. When someone who's running for office claimed that children have a better chance of getting shot than getting a first-class education in Baltimore. There are a few problems with that. First problem is that the claim is just not true. And it's those kinds of comments that dishonor the pride, the courage, and the promise of the people that actually live in our cities, and not simply those who just simply want to talk about them. And they perpetuate a fear that doesn't only accelerate disinvestment, but causes psychological damage to the people that call those communities home. And trust me, nobody wants to address violent crime more than the people that actually live in the community suffering from the violence. Yet we've politicized this issue to a point that we believe it's us against them. So the ask is, let's come together on this. And let's focus on the realities of violence instead of emphasizing the deficiencies in certain communities. Violence touches people in our cities and in our suburbs and in our rural areas. Violent crime isn't a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue. It's an issue facing all of our communities, governed by folks across the political spectrum. And so in this moment, we need to be serious. And we need to depoliticize this. And we need to work together. And until we stop this political blame game while people die, we are never going to make progress. And the second myth is the myth of the media, where I want to be very clear on this point, both because it's important to my message and also because I want to be invited back. But journalists do really important work. You hold yourselves to high standards, you tackle big issues with a commitment to the truth. But I also have a commitment to the truth. And let's be real, not all of your peers share the same standards. There are those in the press who build entire business models designed to sensationalize tragedy and violence. And I don't mean to say that's true of all outlets or even most. But when truth and integrity give way to ratings and readership and clickbait, some press boardrooms are deciding that playing into fear is good for business. The most watched cable news network in the United States has mentioned crime twice as often as its competitors since President Biden was inaugurated. Now, let's look at the data. That's not because crime has suddenly been twice as bad. It's because it drives ratings. And the networks that sensationalize violence miss the full story. You will not hear them talk about bad policies that limit opportunity and increase violence in neighborhoods. You will not hear them talk about pipelines from poverty to prison. You will not hear them talk about the breakage in the system that allows so many of our young people to fall between the cracks. You also will not hear them talk about a single solution. In my first 100 days as governor of the state of Maryland, we have raised wages and got Maryland to now being a state where we are going to be at $15 minimum wage. So gone should be the days when we have people who are working, and in some cases working multiple jobs and still living at or below a poverty line. We boosted resources for mental health services. We secured historic funding for our public schools. We launched the most aggressive assault on child poverty in the history of the state of Maryland. Those investments are going to help us improve public safety. Because when people have opportunity, they are more likely to contribute to communities instead of resorting to crime as a way to survive. But that perspective is oftentimes missing. They're missing in the stories told by too many news outlets, where elected officials can underinvest in housing, elected officials can pull the plug on mass transit projects, but because they call for enhanced sentencing, they're somehow called champions of public safety. Do not allow yourselves to get spun. Most of the most powerful public safety tools that we have to fighting poverty are the things that are going to actually most impact crime. One of the most powerful public safety tools we have is creating pathways to employment and foundations for hope. But that story isn't always told. You see, the false narrative of the media isn't just sensational. It's selective. And that's the danger. Which brings me to my third and the final myth that I want to discuss. And that's the false narrative held by the public. It's a narrative that says we can't do anything to stop violence. For some, it's a narrative that's born from the stories that they watch on TV and the words that they hear from their elected officials. For others, it's a narrative that's born from real experiences of violence and a numbing sense that nobody is going to change the system that actually perpetuate the violence. It's the narrative of the single dad who has seen the faces of the victims of Newtown and of Pulse nightclub and Top Supermarket and Uvalde. It's a narrative of a young man living in the community where the reality of violence isn't something you see on the news, it's something you see in your community every day. A numbness to violence that has gripped our nation in many places and for many reasons. But the result's the same. We've lost our will to do something about it. This false narrative has the power to become even more dangerous than the myths of politicians or the myths of reporters, because when people give up, progress dies. And when the pain is no longer a piercing pain, when that pain starts becoming a chronic one, our apathy in dealing with violence turns all of us into accessories. James Baldwin once said, "What the world does to you, if the world does it to you long enough and effectively enough, you begin to do it to yourself. You become the collaborator. You become an accomplice to your own murderers because you believe the same things that they do." If we want to build safer communities, we need to take apart each and every one of these false narratives and collectively do our part to create new destinies. To my colleagues in government, our words matter, and it's time we stop talking past one another. And elected officials should focus on reducing violence, and I'll be the first to tell you that public safety is my #1 priority. But reducing violence is about much more than failing to come up with a real plan and falling back on partisan talking points that degrade our cities and, more importantly, degrade the people that actually live there. While other states can pass the blame, I can tell you right now in our state, in Maryland, we're ready to set the example. We're ready to set the example by doing things like passing policies that keep our people safe, by securing funding for law enforcement, by enacting common sense gun reforms and stemming the flow of illegal guns into our neighborhoods, by providing additional resources to the Office of our Attorney General and hold violent offenders accountable, and by adding the support for institutions to help root out systemic challenges in our communities, like schools, and mental health supports, and local organizations. And to the folks in the media who are hopefully still listening, you are the ones who are standing between truth and myth in this country. Cover the stories you need to cover, but always, please, be guided by the entirety of the facts. Because the shock and awe strategy is not just irresponsible, it's inaccurate. You miss the stories of how violence emerges in the first place. And you miss the stories of people working towards solutions that will help prevent the violence before it even happens. Pushing back on violence is about accountability and action, yes, but it's also about prevention, coordination, and strategy. And our communities deserve reporting on violence that's thorough and not theoretical or theatrical. And lastly, to the public, these issues aren't too big for us to solve. If you cut through the political ads in the 24-hour news cycle, you will see that we are making progress. In Maryland, we have taken an all-of-the-above approach to public safety, to support state and local law enforcement, to build stronger communities, to coordinate across all parts of government and all parts of society. When I called and said this is going to be an administration priority, I did not just call the head of state police and the head of our legislative offices. We called every single cabinet member and said that we are going to have a collective response to this. And we aren't just moving fast, we are moving together on this. I have watched Marylanders reject this false narrative of helplessness and instead answer the call to work with us to actually tackle violence. The parent in West Baltimore who's providing the guidance her eldest son needs to turn his life around. The minister in Prince George's County who's leading community violence intervention efforts. The school teacher in Mountain, Maryland who's helping an at-risk youth find their way. Now is the time when we can renew our faith, that we can actually do something. Now is the time that we're going to shake ourselves out of this numbness that we feel. Now's the time we're going to end these myths that we've been told to believe, and the time that we are going to reclaim the power that we have to actually make a change. And one of the reasons I decided to run for office 2 years ago is because I believe that we can do more than just simply react to crime, that we can actually prevent it. And we can do more to make our communities safer and make them better. We can do more than pass policies that simply paint over the cracks. But we can actually fix the foundation of what's been broken for a very long time. The 3 myths of violence in America that we've been told to believe, but we don't have to. But I say that we can do something about it. And I know that we will, and that we are. So thank you so much for having me here today. And I look forward to this conversation and your questions. Bless you all, and thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Madam President.
The mysterious microphone. Sorry. That was quite the speech. Thank you.
Uh-oh.
Appreciate that. No.
Sorry.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. We have a lot of questions, so.
Great.
So the first one is from April Ryan, actually.
Yes.
Historically,
Birthday mama.
poverty has been that issue everyone wants solved. However, the devil is in the details.
Yes.
How in 2023 can you formulate a solution where both Democrats and the GOP can agree?
Great question. Great question. You know, great question, birthday mama. Thank you. You know, I remember, so before I decided to run for governor, I ran one of the largest poverty-fighting organizations in this country. And I remember when I first became the CEO, one of the first things that I said I wanted to do is we have to create a policy wing, because up until that time, it was the largest philanthropy in terms of the money that we gave, the organizations we supported, the grants that we gave, but we never had a policy wing. And I remember getting quite a bit of pushback when I first started, and they said, well, listen, we don't do politics here. We do philanthropy. And I remember someone having a conversation with somebody who was telling me that, and I said to them, I said, why do you think poverty exists in the first place? Do you think these disparities exist because one group just isn't working hard enough? Do you think that poverty exists because we just have, we just need to provide grants to X organization or Y organization? The reason that we were spending hundreds of millions of dollars supporting organizations that dealt with food insecurity was because we had a whole lot of people who were food insecure. The reason that we put hundreds of millions of dollars into housing security was because we had a lot of people who were housing insecure. The reason we put hundreds of millions of dollars into educational supports because we had children who were going through schools, and even the ones who completed were still not prepared for college or careers, right? That there are policies that are in place that are putting people and keeping people in poverty. And so when we came on board, I remember it was very clear that we were going to have the most full frontal and the most bipartisan assault on child poverty that this state has ever seen. And if you look at our first legislative session, we were able to get things passed, like a bill that we introduced called the Family Prosperity Act. And what the Family Prosperity Act does, it actually creates an enhancement for the earned income tax credit and makes permanent the child tax credit, two of the most effective child poverty fighting tools that this country has ever seen. And literally, by the passage of that bill, of the Family Prosperity Act, in the stroke of a pen, we were able to lift 34,000 plus children up a rung on the economic ladder with one bill that was passed. We were able to introduce a bill called the Fair Wage Act. And what the Fair Wage Act does, the Fair Wage Act lifted Maryland's minimum wage to $15 an hour. So now again, You're actually making sure that you're honoring work. You're not disincentivizing work. And you're providing a little extra financial cushion, because especially for the people who we're talking about, who are at the $15 mark, trust me, that extra cash that they were getting, that money's going right back into the economy as well. Because now it gives them a little extra money to maybe take their family out for dinner once a month. Maybe provide a little extra support for their children. Maybe put a little bit away so it can put them towards any type of higher education or job training prospects that they might have. And the Fair Wage Act of 2023, a bill that we introduced, lifted over 156,000 Marylanders up a rung on the economic ladder in the stroke of a pen. Now, the reason I bring those up is just a few of the examples of things that we did to show how Maryland is leading when it comes to addressing the issue of child poverty, is this. We introduced 10 bills in our legislative session. Not only did we go 10 for 10 on the bills that we introduced in our first legislative session, by the way, every single one of those bills was passed bipartisan, with both Democrat and Republican support. And so when people say, well, how in the world did you get Democrats and Republicans to agree that we're going to go after this? The reason, my answer was simply this. I went to them. I went to their neighborhoods. I went to their communities. And not just after I became governor. That was the way that we were able to win the election in the first place. We ended up winning with a larger margin than in the last 40 years. We received more individual votes than anyone who has ever run for governor in the history of the state of Maryland. And I tell people, the way you do that is not because you just went out and got Democrat votes. We won Democrats, we won independents, and we took a good chunk of Republicans too. And those are exactly the communities that we went back to after I was inaugurated. And so when you're going out to Hagerstown, or you are spending your time going out, whether you're talking about Westminster or West Baltimore, and you're making the case as to why we need to do things like ensure that we have a child tax credit, why it's important that we can provide greater supports for minimum wage and for low-wage workers. And you can go out to whether you're talking about Mountain Maryland or the Eastern Shore, and you can say, and when you give them the data, they'll look back at you and say, you're talking about me too, aren't you? My answer is absolutely. That this is an issue that we're all wrestling with as a collective state. And so that's the reason why we weren't just able to get passage on the bills, but we were able to get broad, bipartisan passage on these bills. Go make your case. Go to every community. Go with data. And trust me, the people will then turn around and do the work for you and make sure these things get passed.
Do you think those lessons you were just talking about could be applied nationwide? America is divided into political, social, and economic camps in ways this nation has never encountered before. How do you view this country's political, economic, and cultural divides? Do you believe they can be bridged?
I do, because we've seen it happen in Maryland. You know, I'd never run for public office before. You know, before I ran for office, I was an Army officer, and I led soldiers, and I came back and I started a small business, and then I went and ran one of the largest poverty-fighting organizations, and then I decided that I was going to run for governor. And it was a very crowded field. You know, for many of you and many Marylanders you're here, you know, we had 3 statewide elected officials, 2 other people who had run statewide before, 2 cabinet secretaries, a former head of the DNC, and me. When I first started the campaign, we did our first poll. I was literally polling at 1%. I think I'm not voting was polling at 4%. So it was a real uphill climb. But the thing that I realized was this, is that if you can find ways of actually crafting your message and showing that we don't have to politicize everything, that's been part of the problem. That we've asked people to retreat to their camps without being able to show how the issues that we're talking about actually makes a difference. And it was the reason that during my first State of the State, the clarion call that we made to the people of Maryland was this: I want Maryland to be the state that serves. And it's the reason why we're proud of the fact that Maryland is now, another bill that we introduced that we got passed bipartisan, was the SERVE Act of 2023. The SERVE Act of 2023 means that Maryland is now the first state in this country that offers a service year option to our high school graduates. So our high school graduates, they can go on to college, they can go on to trade programs, they can go to work, they can join the military. Well, in the state of Maryland, you've got another option. You can serve. And you can choose however you want to do it. And we're going to help you. And I saw why that mattered during the campaign trail. When I had people who I served with in Afghanistan who came and campaigned to do door knocking on my behalf, many of them were not Marylanders. Many of them were not Democrats. But they came to simply knock on doors and tell people, let me tell you about the guy that I served with. Service is sticky. And those who serve together stay together. And so the reason that I know in the state of Maryland we are showing that we can be different, that we can actually get rid of this political divisiveness and political vitriol, is because we're going to be the state that serves. We're going to be the state that gets to know each other. We're going to be the state that actually bridges these divides. And we're going to be the state that ends up fighting for each other, regardless of your family background or your political allegiance or the neighborhood you come from. That if you can become a society that serves, you are going to be a society that sticks together. That's how we're doing it in Maryland, and I think that is going to be the model for how the rest of the country can move. Maryland's the first state in the country to get something like this passed. I can guarantee you we will not be the last.
There is a housing affordability crisis. People cannot afford to live where they work. What can the government do to solve that problem?
Thank you so much. And I tell you, it's that word is absolutely right, because it is a crisis. And I remember on the campaign trail, people would say, well, you know, inventory is not a problem. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what neighborhoods you're going into, but it's a crisis. And I think that there's really three different things that we can do, and three different things that our administration has already helped to lead on and push on. Is, one, you've got to deal with the inventory. And when I say the inventory, and that means things like whether you have, and it's very locally based in terms of zoning, et cetera, but the truth is that you have certain areas in certain jurisdictions where you have an inventory that's available, it's just not habitable. And so, for example, you take a look at, for example, in Baltimore City right now, we have around 19,000 vacant homes inside of the city of Baltimore. Part of the reason that you have that challenge is Baltimore used to be a city of 920,000 people. It's now a city of just under 600,000. And a lot of that's because you had certain industries left. So you've had the largest population decline within the city of Baltimore, with the exception of Cleveland and Detroit than any other major American city over the past 20 years. And so you have these vacant homes that a city that is built to be able to accustom and support close to 1 million people, but now is supporting a little over 500,000. So you then have spaces that we've got to be able to renovate and fix and rethink, that you can actually provide available inventory, but you have to make sure that it is habitable. You also have to produce more. And that means working in collaboration with the private sector and working in collaboration with developers to be able to make sure that you're actually creating affordable housing options for people. We were actually just at a cutting of a housing site last week, and it's a beautiful, beautiful spot. But one thing that we know is there were very clear guidance and guidelines about the measurements and percentages of affordable housing that must be included inside of the new housing that was built. That you have to be able to make sure that you have a focus on ensuring that housing is going to be accessible to all people and not just some. And the third thing we've got to be able to do, and this is where lawmakers come in, you've got to be able to address the laws to make sure you're protecting and providing greater supports for people who are inside of housing. The number one cause and the number one driver of poverty is housing insecurity. And it's not just complicated and dangerous for the families, it's complicated and dangerous for the children as well, who are now being forced to be moved from spot to spot while they're also trying to maintain their schooling. who are moving from spot to spot while they're also dealing with all the other societal challenges that exist. And so by being able to focus on construction, the fixing and renovation, and creating better laws that do a better job of both supporting renters and supporting people who are living inside of the homes and creating better pathways for people to become homeowners. And that's why one of the bills that we introduced and we passed, bipartisan, was also something that focused on creating greater levels of supports for first-time home buyers and giving people a greater sense of security, making sure that people have a chance of ownership, because it's not just going to be about where they're living. This is also a chance for people to actually gain a measurement of wealth, something they can pass on to their children besides debt. And so this is a crisis in our state, and I think that's the reason that our state is moving so aggressively to address the crisis as we know it and as we see it.
So a part of that problem is attracting more businesses to Maryland, as you mentioned. Are you willing to lower taxes, and how would you incentivize small businesses? Yeah,
absolutely. And I tell you, I mean, if you look at our first budget that we passed, when we clear and people say, oh, taxes can be out of control. Not only didn't we raise taxes, we gave the people of our state a $200 million tax cut. So if the question is, are you willing to raise taxes? The answer is yes, we already have. But I also think it's important for people to understand that that is not alone what incentivizes businesses. Businesses are not making decisions as to where they're going to go and where they're going to relocate exclusively on tax margins. You know what questions they're also asking? Tell me about your schools. Tell me about your transportation options. Tell me about your housing. They're making decisions based on an idea of, I'm also thinking about quality of life for my employees. I'm thinking about what other type of supports are being provided for the people who are living there, and not just simply on how many bips of a discount are we going to get on a tax rate. And the reason I know that is because I was a small business owner myself, and people say, it's difficult to have a business in the state of Maryland. My answer was, I know, I had to do it. So the other thing that Maryland has to do, when we say that we are going to be a state that's going to be both more competitive and more equitable, and it's not a choice, we're going to do both, it does mean things like, how are we actually reducing regulatory red tape, reducing the fact that it takes too long. Right now in the state of Maryland, it could take up to 3 years for permitting. If you're not addressing that, I don't care what your tax rate is. If you're not actually leveraging the fact that Maryland is some of the best assets in the entire country, I will put our assets against anybody. We are literally the home of some of the largest and most effective military installations in this country. We're the home of U.S. Cyber Command, the home of Fort Meade, the home of the Naval Academy, the home of 4 of the top HBCUs in America in one state. We have some of the top institutions of higher education. We have the Port of Baltimore. We have the Chesapeake Bay. We have every asset. We're the home of quantum. We have some of the best assets in the world. The problem right now is Maryland is asset rich and we are strategy poor. So if we get serious on that, that's the best way you're actually going to attract and retain your businesses. Being business friendly means understanding all the questions that CEOs ask and not just one. And that's how Maryland is moving. And I'm very clear, I want the other governors to like me, I guess. But they are learning very quickly, I am very competitive. And every time I go to one of their states, I'm bringing 3 businesses back with me. Unapologetically. And I'll say one more very quick thing, too, about this along these lines. Another question that CEOs are asking? I think one thing we are seeing increasingly is the CEOs are having a really difficult time building their businesses up in places that don't share their values. And that doesn't just mean their business values. I mean, we've got a whole lot of people right now who essentially are going to become politically homeless, where you have businesses that are being created in states where that state is actively telling half of their employee base that you are no longer in control of your reproductive rights. That we have businesses and entrepreneurs that are developing businesses in states where the children of their employees are being told which books are worth them reading and whose history is worth understanding and knowing. So to all those businesses and CEOs, to all those entrepreneurs, to all those teachers who now find yourself under investigation because you are teaching Beloved or the Bluest Eye, to all those teachers who now find themselves under investigation because they're teaching about, or students who are taking coursework in gender studies, and by the way, you're now attending a university where gender studies is now illegal. Or because you can't learn about things like Stonewall or Anne Frank. To everybody who's existing in a state like that, my answer to you and my statement to you is simple. Come to Maryland. Because we would love to have you here.
Speaking of competition,
Uh-oh.
how are discussions going on about the FBI relocation? Are you and Governor Youngkin discussing the situation?
So, you know, I tell you, on the FBI building, and just as context, the FBI is relocating, and it's now in between two different locations. It's between Northern Virginia, and it's between Prince George's County, Maryland. And I hope that was for Maryland. There we go, good. Let's make sure the timing was right. And so the GSA, the General Service Administration, and also and the current administration, current Biden administration, has been very clear about the guidelines that have been laid out as to how they are making their determination on the building. And if you look at the guidelines that have been laid out, cost, time of delivery, transportation assets, equity, Maryland wins across the board on each and every one of those things. It will cost upwards of around $1 billion more for this building to be built in Virginia. It'll also take 2 years longer for them to develop it because the Virginia site is not yet prepared or ready for it or prepped. We have transportation assets in the state of Maryland that are ready to go, where you literally have the future home of the FBI that's sitting on metro lines. And on equity, currently right now, if you look at economic competitiveness of the top 150 jurisdictions in the country, Fairfax County, Virginia, the place where the FBI building will be located in Virginia, currently ranks number 2. Prince George's County in Maryland ranks 112. And let's be clear, Prince George's County is one of the most affluent African-American communities inside this country, but what it's also a place is, it's been a place that historically has been neglected when it comes to federal assets. So let's be very honest. When we're talking about Northern Virginia and the economic activity of Northern Virginia, let's also remember that Northern Virginia is also the home of the Pentagon and the CIA building. Don't think for a second that those did not have a significant impact on the economic engine that is Northern Virginia. And so simply on a parity argument and on a fairness argument and on an argument of, let's just stay by what you laid out as your guidelines, this building should be in the state of Maryland. But I do think there is something that does also become important in it right now, and that becomes two things. The mission, the future mission of the FBI, which the GSA said is important, and if the future mission of the FBI, as they laid out, as the FBI director laid out, says a large part of the future mission of the FBI is going to be cyber. Well, Maryland is the home of U.S. Cyber Command. Maryland is the home of Fort Meade. Maryland is the home, so two of the top institutions in the country when it comes to cyber, when it comes to training in the pipeline, are Johns Hopkins University and the University of Maryland. So we win on that basis too. And not to mention the fact that right now, as we are having these, they are having these debates in Washington about whether or not the FBI should even be funded and whether it should be defunded. Truthfully, of the two jurisdictions, there's only been one chief executive that has said that they wholeheartedly believe in the mission of the FBI and that it should be funded. And I think that matters. So we're going to see where it goes. I think the decision should be made soon. But I've been very, very clear. And what I'm saying is not emotive. What I'm saying is data. That building should be in the state of Maryland. Full stop.
Speaking of another asset, or not, maybe, what are you willing to do to keep the Washington Commanders playing in Maryland under their new leadership? Do you see the state spending more tax money to keep them in Maryland?
Is this question from a member of my family? I said, Thanksgiving's going to be a fascinating one this year. Listen, I want the Commanders in Prince George's County. And I think they belong in Prince George's County, and frankly, we're the only jurisdiction that thus far has said and actually has put plans together to be able to incentivize them staying inside of Prince George's County. I think they're going to be a valuable member of the community. And when you look at even the investments that we have made inside of that region and inside of that area in our current in our first budget, we put $400 million going towards development in the Blue Line corridor, which is where the Commander Stadium is going to be. And the reason that we did that is because my insistence is this: I want the Commanders in Prince George's County. But the only success that I care about is not just what happens inside the stadium and on the field. I want the neighborhood to benefit. I want our small businesses to benefit. I want there to be community development. I want there to be community upliftment. And frankly, I want something different than the way that it looks right now. Because for those who have gone to a Commanders game, the truth is there is not enough activity around it that the entire community benefits from it. That has to change. And so I am anxious. I know we're still waiting on the final details. And once the ink is dry and all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, I'm looking forward to personally sitting down with the new leadership. I'm convinced that Maryland is going to give them the best opportunity to build not just a championship team, but a championship culture. I know that we're the only, and I've said very clearly, I believe in public-private partnerships. I believe that public-private partnerships work and that they should exist, and we should have a measure of collaboration between public entities. I also, though, believe this: if the public is not benefiting from it, that's where I stop. I need to be able to see, and people need to be able to understand, that public-private partnerships need to inherently benefit the public. So I believe that Maryland is going to be the best spot for the Commanders. I look forward to having 2 championship-worthy teams inside of the state of Maryland. And I can't wait to see the Ravens and the Commanders going at it for a generation to come. But I also know this, is while I believe in public-private partnerships, I also believe that the public has got to be at the forefront of the beneficiaries of that public-private partnership.
You mentioned the Blue Line, but you plan to relaunch the expansion of the Red Line. How is it going to get done? Where is the money coming from for this, and when will it get done?
So I'd say the Red Line, for those who might not be as familiar, the Red Line was a project that was put together to expand east-west transit within the Baltimore region. And this was a project that we actually had capital earmarked from the federal government. This has been a project that has been decades long in the making, that involved everything from community involvement, community engagement. It also had an environmental impact study that was done and completed as to the environmental impact on it. And in 2015, the decision was made to cancel it. By the way, not just cancel it, the decision was made to return close to $1 billion back to the federal government, with the response basically like, we don't need it. And still to this day, I'm trying to figure out who the we was, because it certainly wasn't people living in that community. Not only did we have a unique opportunity to be able to create a mass transit avenue that can move people from where they live to where opportunity lies. Not just did we have an opportunity to create a mass transit option that can further our goal of being able to reduce a reliability of cars on the road that's going to be not just environmentally healthy and friendly, but also reduce measurements of stress on our communities. We gave it away. And we took a portion of that money, first gave some of it back to the federal government, and then took the rest to put towards building out roads in the suburbs. So we campaigned on the idea that I said, we are going to revive this. And one thing the people in the state of Maryland are learning, that if I said it, I meant it. And so just last week, we announced that the Red Line is now back online. And to get it done, we are both going to work and support with our state, where, in our state, in our first budget, we allocated $100 million that are going towards mass transit options. Part of that will be going towards the development, the next phase in the process for the Red Line. But then also, I'm blessed by the fact that we have a federal government right now who's actually helping to make this happen. Where if you look at what's happened with the IAJA, you look at what's happened with the IRA, part of the beauty of having a partner like the Biden administration is this, is everything that we are going to get done when it comes to things like offshore wind, and where I want Maryland to become the offshore wind capital of this country. So much of that's going to happen because we are working in partnership with the federal government. Because of the IRA, we have a unique opportunity to make that happen. What we're able to do with the red line is also partially for the fact that we now have $1.3 trillion that's going to be allocated by the federal government to going towards local jurisdictions and states and municipalities to be able to focus on things like roads and bridges and mass transit. So what is going to get done will be a partnership between the state and the federal government. That we are going to be working with community and we're going to be working with the private sector in order to make that happen. And knowing that everything from the details of where the lines are going to exist to what type of framework is it going to take place. Are you talking about rail? Are you talking about BRTs? Whatever it is, all that's going to be done in coordination and communication with the community, because there's 3 lenses that I will look at every single transportation project. One is equity, and that includes who is building it and who can benefit from it. The second is the environment, that we're not putting together transportation assets that are going to be harmful to our environment. And the third is community involvement and community engagement. The Red Line project checks off all 3 of those elements. And so now we just have to make sure we operationalize it. So the goal is that we are going to be able to begin construction between 2026 and 2027. I want it built as fast as humanly possible because we are going to show that in this administration, we get things done on time and on budget. And that is going to be the focus of what we're going to get done with the Red Line and beyond.
Great. Let's shift back to politics. U.S. Senator Ben Cardin is retiring. What endorsement announcements are you prepared to make today to fill that seat?
Ben Cardin, and I do think it's important, and it's not, I'm going to come back to the question. But I do think it's important to start off with what a remarkable career that Ben Cardin has had. I say I am so blessed to have the federal delegation that I have. And I'm saddened that I'm going to lose, the dean of our federal delegation in 18 months. And the thing that I do know is this: is that it's already a very wide primary field. We also know that there's a very good chance that the field is not yet settled. And so the thing that I'm looking for right now, and the thing that I've been very clear about to all the people who have both said they're running and people who have contacted me and said they're considering it, and most of them, I have to say just truthfully, they're not just colleagues. Most of them are friends. And I don't use that word lightly. Legitimate friends. But the thing that I've said to each and every one of them is that I'm going to be staying close and paying very close attention. I want this to be a race that is going to be substance-based. I want this race to be issue-oriented. And I want this to be a race that's positive. And if I see any inclinations that it's not going in that direction, I will step in quickly. So while I'm not prepared to say anything or make an endorsement today, at some point, will I make my voice heard? Potentially, yes. At some point, am I making sure that when my voice is heard, that it's heard thoroughly and forcefully? Potentially, yes. But I think that the people who have opted to go into this race thus far are really good, really qualified. I think some of the people who have contemplated said they're still contemplating it. They are really good and really qualified. I'm thankful that in our state we got a bench like this. I really am. And I think that, I'm not sure, I just truthfully, I have not been as close to the Republican side. They have not contacted me and told me who's considering it right. But whoever does opt to get in on their side, they should know that whoever makes it out of the Democratic primary is not just going to be ready, they're going to have the full weight and support of me and my folks to make sure they can make it across the finish line.
Do you feel we should have geographical diversity in the state Senate delegation? For instance, there are a considerable number of endorsements for Angela Alsobrooks, the Prince George's County Executive.
There are. There are, and people should take note. I mean, I think Angela again is one of those people who is one of those people I was speaking about who is a legit friend, and an extraordinary candidate. And I do believe in making sure that we have elements of diversity. And listen, if you look at the cabinet that I assembled, we did not just assemble the most diverse cabinet in the history of the state of Maryland, where literally you look at our cabinet. We are very intentional about the fact that I want everybody in our state to be able to look it up at our cabinet and say, I see myself in that cabinet. Where currently our cabinet right now is 54% women, 60% people of color. It is this is an extraordinary cabinet that has been selected. But the thing that I also want people to know is this. It's also the most talented and qualified cabinet in the history of the state of Maryland. And I'll put that against anybody. That making sure you're focusing on equity does not mean you're compromising excellence. And I think we've continued to show that inside of our work. So I do believe that diversity is going to be important. I think people being able to know that their representatives are reflective of their values. I do think all those things are very important. And I'm grateful for the fact that even if you look at what's been assembled thus far within the people who have already opted to run and the people who are considering running, once again, I think Maryland is showing that we are a state that doesn't just value making sure that we have diversity, but we reward it.
Thank you, Governor. I wanted to take a quick moment to thank the organizers of today's events, Headliners team member Chuck Porcari, Headliners code team leaders Dinah Lywan Leger and Lori Russo, Club Events Coordinator Cecily Scott Martin, and Club Executive Director Didier Salgi. It is also my honor to present you, Governor, with the much coveted National Press Club mug.
Yes, I was hoping I would get one of these. Thank you.
Thank you for answering all our questions. We have many questions, so we hope you come back to the National Press Club.
I think I have to come back. I got a lot more questions to
I
answer.
know, that's so many.
This is great. Thank you.
So much.
Bless you all again. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.
Meeting adjourned.
Donna, good job. When does this issue go to press?